flow and give survival to creation. Generation to generation, conservation with separation. Everybody, it is done. When the water goes low, Lord shedding goes high. Same problems, same questions, little na my Lord. Let's recycle manzi, use the manzi wisely. Somebody lani, hey, somebody lani, somebody lani, oh, somebody lani, hey, somebody lani, somebody lani, hey, somebody lani,
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 World Environment Day Symposium. My name is Miriam Adiola Gadibo, and joining me today will be
Jenny Ariola, and will be your host for today.
This year, we're determined that a global pandemic will not hinder us from advocating and fostering a safer and healthier environment for us all. So here we are, an online symposium-like webinar.
For us, this is a blessing in disguise, as this opportunity gives us an avenue to spread the good news beyond our borders, and also give us an avenue to reach a wider audience for this year's celebration.
The United Nations theme for this year's World Environment Day is biodiversity. And today we'll be discussing the interconnectivity between one of the major issues, one of the major global issues of our time, that is climate change and our biodiversity system. Today joining us, we have diplomats. We have different people from different walks of life. We have diplomats, we have people from academia, we have public-private partners, we have environmental activists, students, young entrepreneurs, and so on. Today's program will be divided into two major segments. The first segment will be speeches from our keynote speakers. His Excellency Carl Michael Grants, the Swedish Ambassador and Head of Missions to Nigeria. Our second keynote speaker will be Professor Adedeji, the Director General of Forestry Institute of Nigeria, who will be duly represented by the Director of Research in person of Professor Akidapo Akinyemi, who is also from Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria.
At this junction, I would also like to welcome the British High Commissioner to Nigeria. You're welcome, sir. Now, moving forward, the second segment of this program will be involve a panel session, and we'll have the following people: Dr. Olatunde Oginni, an associate professor and the head of Department of Fisheries at the Adjacent University. We also have Dr. Onoja, the director of technical programs at the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. We have Mrs. Kafilat Adedeji, the founder of Prudent Associate Agro-Industry and a PhD researcher at the University of Ibadan, and Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu, the director of Farm Crowdy, to help us do justice to the overall gamut of today's topic of discussion.
At this junction, we'd also like to welcome from the British Council of Nigeria, Mr. Sean Melbourne, who is joining us this morning. Also joining us on this webinar, we have political scientist and veteran broadcaster Edmund Ogilu. At this point, we want to say a warm welcome to our keynote speakers and our panelists for today. To start the event, may I introduce the founder of 111112 Foundation, Mr. Adetunji Lam Adeshino, for short for Magnus.
Thank you very much, Miriam. His Excellency, the Swedish Ambassador and Head of Mission to Nigeria, Carl Michael Grants, the representative of the British High Commission to Nigeria, Sean Melbourne, a representative of the Director General, Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria, Professor Akinyemi, Dr. Olatunde Oginni, Mrs. Kafilat Adedeji, Dr. Joseph Onoja, and Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu, my ever-vibrant journalist Edmond Dubilo, all the able young environmentalists present here today. Say a warm welcome to us all to yet another World Environment Day celebration. Quite a different version this year, as everyone is marking the day online through the world. Nature and Planet has sent us a strong signal in what most of us see as unprecedented in our lifetime thus far. While the planet is talking to us that we definitely depend on it to survive. Nature is saying everything is reciprocal. So if we love nature, nature will love us back. If we cherish nature, nature will cherish us back. If we care for nature, nature will care for us in return. And if we use nature sustainably, the same will happen to us all. Then it is for our own good. This is not time for us to, this is the time for us to think and rethink, to strategize and re-strategize for a more peaceful, healthy, safe present and future for us all. Like I've always told people, this day is really not to celebrate, but to take stock of our environmental journey thus far, to learn from best practices, compare, contrast, and critique policies, actions, and efforts, and of course, channel a sustainable way forward. This year, we are talking about biodiversity, a very important part of our existence. However, this doesn't mean that we should drop all other ones that we've been working on. So last year, we talked about air pollution. It's still very important. What this day means is for us to add something else to our list of what we're going to be doing going forward. It is a great time for us all to think of our personal commitment and efforts in the very, very important cause that we are all channeling. I know that if we must achieve the United Nations sustainable goals, the environment sector has a very, very big role to play. And we all have a lot to give back as well. Once again, we are all welcome, and I wish us all a happy and rewarding session here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. At 11-11-12 Foundation, going green is very paramount to us. We do not only promote, but empower young people in the green sector to ensure a more sustainable and safer future for us all. Did you know that there is a country that has positioned herself as one of the most progressive on environmental issues? This country hosted the United Nations conference, which led to the formation of the United Nations Environmental Programme, a leading authority on environmental issues. This country has seen only 1% of her solid waste heading to landfill. The remaining 99% is either recycled or converted into biogas. In 2005, this country prohibited the selling of plastic drinks to ensure those plastic drinks that do not comply with the country's recycling program. I'm sure everyone is wondering which country is this country that has positioned herself so incredibly. This country is Sweden. At this junction, may I welcome and introduce the Swedish Ambassador and Head of Mission to Nigeria, His Excellency Carl Michael Grant. You're welcome, sir. and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this fantastic introduction. It's almost embarrassing, the praise that you give in the beginning. Thank you so much for inviting me to deliver a keynote address on the occasion of World Environment Day 2020. As you know by now, my name is Olatunde. I am the Swedish Ambassador to Nigeria, but also to Ghana and Cameroon. The theme for this year's World Environment Day is biodiversity, and it reminds us how we're all connected with nature. It also stresses the need for us to conserve and sustainably manage our resources. The link between biodiversity and climate change is obvious, I think. As human beings, we have repeatedly witnessed the negative consequences of our changing climate. Other components of our biodiversity are equally important. And the impact of climate change on our ecosystems is not only environmental. These impacts also have a significant social, cultural, and economic consequences that cannot be overlooked. What this tells us all is that we must start changing our ways of doing things. I am confident to say that Sweden is trying, at least, to take the lead by integrating the climate into all relevant policy areas. Sweden's Climate Policy Action Plan contains 132 measures that the government of Sweden will implement to address climate change and protect biodiversity. Sweden is committed to lead the way on climate finance, which is crucial in this, being the largest contributor per capita to the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and the Adaptation. Here in Nigeria, we will continue to support climate-friendly organizations and provide backing to institutions working to preserve Nigeria's natural resources. I have looked at the program, and it is impressive to see the selection of speakers. I understand that Professor Adedeji, the Director General of Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria, as you mentioned, is unable to join us. I'm happy to see other speakers, prominent speakers, and also a diplomat colleague, Sean Melbourne, the head of climate change and energy at the British Commission, is able to join and have a keynote speech. So, looking forward very much to these remarks, and thank you once again for inviting me as a guest speaker, and I wish you a very fruitful World Environmental Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. I mean, my takeaway from that brief speech would be that while environmental problems abound, while environmental issues persist, we have the ability to implement initiatives that can alleviate these problems.
This day, the 11-11-12 Foundation opened up a competition for participants from all over on all social media handles to tell us way forward in addressing the effect of climatic conditions on biodiversity. And we had entries from all walks of life. We'll be announcing the winners on later in the program. So do stay with us.
Let's move on to the panel now. We'd like to move straight on to our list of panelists, and of course we're going to get the conversation underway. Remember, this webinar, the topic we are discussing today is the interconnectivity between biodiversity and climate change. So at this point we will be introducing our panelists.
Our panelists include Dr. Olatunde Oginni, Dr. Onoja, Mrs. Kafilat Adedeji, and Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu. While we address pertinent issues relating to biodiversity and climate change, we are also going to look at ways in which young people, while protecting biodiversity and the ecosystem, can make a clean and healthy living out of it.
Before we commence the question segment, I'd like to remind everyone that you can send in your questions via chat. Include your name alongside your location. That way we can address the questions appropriately. My first question this morning is for Dr. Oginni. Dr. Oginni, can you please explain biodiversity and its economics? How would you explain its relevance to the global economy?
Thank you very much. Let me first thank the organizers of this forum for bringing into fore the importance of biodiversity in the world, and to appreciate the Swedish government for their generosity in anchoring the program. Now back to the question. Biodiversity is essentially to do with the abundance, the varieties and variations in organisms up to genetic level. For example, you have different species of animals. Among these animals, you also have some genetic differences. The varieties that are available and the effects on the environment encompass the total biodiversity of a given area. Now, when you look at biodiversity, it has a lot of importance to play in our life. For example, from abundance biodiversity, you get food and raw material. Human beings naturally cannot survive without food. And apart from getting all our food from the environment, we also have some impact made on our earth. For example, through food, you have the production of crops and animals. The bees, for example, they help in pollination. Without good pollination, there won't be fruit production. And without fruit production, there will be starvation in the world. Also, some of the plants that are available act to help us in terms of earth, to mean the aesthetic value that has some pleasing connection with our spiritual life is also very important. From the economic point of view, the biodiversity, the foods that are available provide jobs and employment to some people. The plants that have medicinal value provide jobs for those who are in that area. A very easy example of earth from plants is the food supplements that you have all over the place. Some of these food supplements are basically derived from plant origin, and which can refer to as bioprospecting, in which we make use of the genetic components or inherent qualities, biological qualities of plants to treat human beings. From this, some people make their living, and those who make their living from this are very common among us. Also, we have tourism. When we're talking about economics, tourism provides a lot of benefits to those in rural areas especially, and those who are very close to nature. We have the ECOWAS in Nigeria. We have the Yankari Game Reserves. These are tourist spots that, apart from providing aesthetic value, they also provide income to the people. So people are able to make some living from the environment through the sustenance of the ecosystem. Also, we have the raw materials. The timber is being used for building and construction purposes. We also have some other activities, the mining, the extraction of petroleum, and some other things. The food aspect, we can also look at from an economic point of view. The people who are involved in hunting, those who are involved in hunting, game management, and tourist managers. Now, we also have the issue of recycling. When you have a very good environment, a lot of resources can be taken from nature. However, in doing this, we have to do it at sustainable rates. The economic effect must be merged with the sustainability of the environment. And we should not try to abuse such, because from this environment, we get our raw materials, we get our food. From this food, some people make some economic benefits. Tourists come around. When they come around, let's take Nigeria, money, but it helps the economy to grow. The people, other economic actors will move in to bring tourists and take them in and out. Also, there will be other provision of artifacts. People take home when they are going. Those who are the environment for us, source of living, employment, income, and spiritual well-being. All these take a very big, play a very big role in enhancing life sustenance and life expectancy. An environment that is devoid of pollution provides for a lot of activity. The green areas in our parks allow us to take in fresh air, and this fresh air enhances our health. As the parable says, health is wealth. When you are healthy, you can get involved in a lot of economic activity. You can maximize whatever you have to make sure you get a maximum output from your little input. Also, all the activity, like agriculture, for example, if you have good biodiversity and you engage in sustainable agriculture, then you're going to have a very good economic benefit from harvest of your crops, rearing of your animals in a conducive environment. For example, when you have a very good biodiversity, the rate at which vectors bring pest infection into your animal will be highly reduced. Along with this, even human beings will be in good health. The abuse of biodiversity has led to a lot of vector problems, whereby there are changing perspective of vectors in the world. For example, areas that are not prone to malaria before, because of the climate change and rise in temperature in these areas, some of them are now facing malaria issue, and this reduces the available time to generate income. Because when people are sick, apart from the sick person, the caregivers are also not able to go anywhere. Family members are forced to stay with the sick person to take care of them. Resources that will have been used to increase production will go into treatment of the sick person, and as this occurs, it affects the economic standard of the people, especially in the rural areas where health facility is still very low. So, generally speaking, biodiversity has a very positive effect on our economic activity, especially if we do it in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that response. My next question goes to the Swedish Ambassador and Head of Missions to Nigeria. Beyond the environment and climate change, can His Excellency tell us some of what Sweden has done and is doing to ensure environmental sustainability?
Yes, I think that it's a process and it has taken some time, and the process is not finished. I would say that it's a mixture of civil society pushing the issue, media covering the issue, consumers being more and more aware of this, and then politicians driving the issue, and then we have the parliament taking laws about the issue. So it's really, I think you have to engage the entire society and very different actors in this to bring it forward. And there have been different laws. You mentioned some of them beginning about plastics, targets about biofuel, for instance, and I mentioned fossil-free. That's in the future, but still we engage, like many other countries, in the Agenda 2030, and that's really the road for all of us to follow in different ways, because countries are, of course, very different. Nigeria has a lot of oil, we do not. But we have challenges in our energy mix. So, yeah, it's really, it takes time, but it's an open society, democratic society can move this forward.
To sum up what you're saying, the will of the people, good leadership, good policies, these are some of the things Nigeria needs to consider to achieve environmental sustainability. All right, we go on to our very next question.
And I would like to throw this question to Mrs. Kafilat Adedeji. There is so much talk on the concept of sustainability all over the place. Sustainable development, sustainability. We need to ensure sustainability of environmental resources. Ma, what is sustainability? Can you please explain the concept of sustainability so that we could understand what it actually means?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. So basically, talking about sustainability, I think the word is, we use it a lot, and it's important we know the meaning of sustainability. So basically, what sustainability entails is it's social. Basically, sustainability is the process by which we present the world without jeopardizing the ability of future generations to also. Now we are taking from the system, we are continuing back, we have to turn back the system as much as we're taking it, like from the ecosystem, as much as we are taking from it, we also create a balanced system. It's just a process of mimicking nature, mimicking what's really happens in the natural environment, how every part of the ecosystem are able to work together and able to make the whole world to be a balanced state. Okay, my audio is not clear. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, I'll take this over. I want to be able to find the term sustainability for us. So when we use the term, frequently it's very common to be able to know the effects of implication of it in every of our lives. So I'm saying that sustainability can be looked at in the economic perspective, in the environmental perspective, as well as the social perspective. And basically, what sustainability entails, all of these perspectives, the way of you dealing or the way of you building systems such that you are considering the present world and you don't want to jeopardize the existence, the ability of future generations to also be able to benefit from the system. While you're benefiting at the moment, you don't want to jeopardize the ability of the future generations to also benefit from the system. You want to be taking from the ecosystem as much as you're giving back to it. You don't just want to pay a consumer, just take, and not return it. So that's just basically I can summarize the term sustainability, what it means generally. But when you want to kind of sectionalize it to different sectors where this word is being used, because you have to apply it. It's all originated from our ecosystem, how the whole world is maintained in a balanced state, how nature maintains the whole world in a balanced state, such that every part of the ecosystem are able to compete together, are able to live together without the existence of one affecting the other, creating a kind of balance in the ecosystem. So we want to mimic nature, we want to mimic the natural environment, to also be able to develop models in affecting our environment, affecting our economic needs, and affecting our social impact in such a way that we want to create a balanced system, and we don't want one to be affected by the other. We don't want our present conditions to jeopardize the essence of the future generations, basically. So when we are looking at it at the economic point of what we usually refer to as the profit sharing model, in business model or any aspect of our business opportunity, we want to look at that. Whatever we are building, we want to take into consideration the environmental impact. I don't know whether we understand this or be able to get that all. So we want to be able to understand the environmental impact that every of our actions as a company, as a public organization, as an individual, how is it affecting the environment? How are we taking from the environment? Are we ensuring that we're also returning to the environment such that we want to create a balance? Because the effect of this taking and not returning to the environment is what we want to lead to our environmental pollution, our climate action that is now top of the time. We will be changing climate action and everything. It's because of the fact that we as the human leader of the ecosystem, we have always been taking from the environment without returning to it. So in that case, it will be a balance. And this imbalance is what is causing different effects, different negative impact we're having on climate action at the moment. So that's so much time looking at how companies, how business models built into their system, sustainability, how they will dive into their development and the product developments and every service development, how they are going to take into consideration sustainability, such that their actions as business, their actions as corporate organization, their actions as individuals will not jeopardize the environment, and they also make different profits from it. They want to open their profit share in their earnings for their salary, for the staffs and all of that. So that's basically the economic aspect. In the environmental aspect, we want to have biodiversity, like Dr. mentioned earlier. We want to ensure that we don't just want to develop our model to just suit a particular component of the environment without considering the condition. We want to consider plants, animals, the microorganisms, the different species. We don't want to endanger one species because we want to benefit from the other species. So that's basically the environmental aspect. If we maintain that balance, there will be one cost of and there won't be a problem of climate action and all of that. So also the social aspect, everyone has to be, we want to consider the social well-being of our people, their health when they are developing the skills, when they are working in our companies. We want to consider their health. We want to consider their benefits, their own lifestyle. Also, we just don't want to consider what we are getting from them to develop our products, and they are not considering how they are also develop their products. We want to consider them as humans, and they are human, they have the social needs to meet. We want to be able to meet it, create a balance, while also be able to harness their potential to be able to give us a better benefit as a people. So I'm being wide in the case of this concept, so that we don't limit it to the scope of plants and animals and everything. We want to broaden the scope of the world sustainability goals. We don't just have to limit the scope of sustainability to just plants and animals. We want us to see it as a broad scope that can be applied in every facet of our lives. If we want to be a balanced ecosystem, so to say.
Right. All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Adedeji, for that response. Now that we have an understanding of what biodiversity is and a full concept of sustainability, when you must make sure you give back. It's not enough to just keep taking and depleting, we have to keep replenishing. Now that we have an understanding of these concepts, one question is for Dr. Onoja. Can you explain to us how biodiversity can impact sustainable development?
Well, at the base of sustainable development is biodiversity. What we must realize is that biodiversity is our support base. So before we talk about any development at all, not talk about the one that is sustainable, we must consider that biodiversity as a base of it. And that is why even the economists in the World Economic Forum last year, they've come up with the idea that in building the SDGs, the ones that concern the environment, biodiversity is the one at the base. And that is where everything is built upon.
We're going to move on to our next question. I will come back to Dr. Onoja.
Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu, as an entrepreneur in the agricultural sector, could you please tell us what it's like doing business in this biodiversity sector? What is it like doing business currently in Nigeria in this sector? What are the challenges and hindrances in doing so?
Okay, good morning, everybody. So basically, what we have come to understand around what we do is, like almost all the speakers have said, the issues of biodiversity and sustainability is at the very peak of what most organizations should be looking at. But like you said, currently, there are issues around food security, and most of the farmers that we know of basically would have to pick between these biodiverse principles, sustainability principles, or to feed themselves. Unfortunately, feeding themselves and staying alive is very, very important. So talking about how we see these concepts on the field as a business, we first know that there are 4 major challenges that farmers will have to scale through to be able to even stay alive in the first place. The fact that they have productivity issues are very low, post-harvest losses are very high, access to finance is almost non-existent, and even when they're done, how do they have to go through multiple layers of intermediaries to be able to sell what they have. But at the very core of what they do is that principle around sustainability, which as private businesses and impact-driven businesses like Farm Crowdy, we have at the very core of what we do. Food security has basically 4 levels, and the last level is about sustainability. Food can be available and it's not accessible. Food can be accessible yet it's not fit for use. Food can be available, accessible, fit for use, but it's not sustainably produced and it's not sustainable over time. So at the core of the very job that we do here as a business is sustainability. And like Dr. Onoja said, the issue of biodiversity is the very fabric upon which even sustainability sits on. So it's difficult driving these principles, but I think lots of businesses are beginning to see the need for, you look at the major brewing companies and processors in Nigeria, you begin to hear concepts like sustainable sourcing strategies. Sustainable sourcing strategies fit into sustainable production. Sustainable production fits into how do you conserve the environment in such a way that everyone is happy, right? We're beginning to see things around effective use of fertilizers, effective applications of fertilizers, soil testing, right, as against just applying all sorts of chemicals. We're seeing concepts around organic cultivation that puts into consideration the environment, efficient use of water, the use of technology, drone services, and have the capacity to be able to check for plant health, as against just spraying the entire land with chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, even where they are not required. We also opted for organic ways of treating pests and diseases, as against the use of chemicals on farmlands. So these are various areas that it's going to take a while for us to be able to get to where in the Western world they are. But these are principles that are evolving. These are principles that farmers have been taught about. These are principles that will be able to improve the productivity of farmers. These are principles that will be able to drive food security at the end of the day. So as a business, yes, we try as much as possible to be able to inculcate a couple of all of these principles. But most importantly, I think farmers need to survive. The environment also needs to live. So it's how do we have a perfect mix that will be able to create a sustainable development across borders.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that response, sir. Before we proceed to the next question, His Excellency, the Swedish Ambassador, Carl Michael Grants, would like to exit the webinar, so we'd like to invite him for any final words.
Okay, thank you. I suppose it's about the question of financing. That's on the chat. And, you know, I mentioned, I think, at the beginning, the big funds, the Global Environment Facility and the Green Climate Fund, etc. And those are global funds. Sweden works mainly through the United Nations in different sectors, not only the environment, because we believe very much in the multilateral system. And the United Nations are one of the main pillars of the multilateral system. So we put money into the global funds, and then, of course, they are distributed in the very best way, hopefully, different projects. Could be biodiversity, but I mean, it's a very broad range of different topics, actually, to be supported. We do have a national agency that you have heard about, perhaps SIDA, the Swedish International Development Agency. They focus on, they have projects on their own, of course, all over the world, and work together with the United Nations and the civil society organizations, environmental movements. So we do have a national program as well. I don't know the details about SIDA's environmental programs, but once again, mainly the global funding, and we're great supporters of global funding and think that countries should put money together in these big funds where they be used in the very best way. But financing is really crucial. It is, and we need more money to be invested in these issues from different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen.
May I, before I have to leave at 12 o'clock, I'm so sorry. Please continue your discussions. So Sweden.se live. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Swedish Ambassador and Head of Missions to Niger, His Excellency Carl Michael Grants. Thank you for joining us, sir. We're going to move on to our next question. Remember, you can send in your questions using the question and answer segment of this webinar. Next question. All right, I'm going to direct this question to Dr. Oginni. Dr. Oginni, please, what are the threats to biodiversity in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. The threats to biodiversity in Nigeria can be viewed from two angles. The institutional ones and the individual ones. Creation of natural resources for creation of income for the nation. These natural resources, they are God-given, or nature's benefits to us. However, we need to use them properly and effectively in a way that they will not endanger our lives and those of people coming after us. For example, one major threat present in Nigeria is the issue of oil exploration. We go to most of the oil communities now. The effect of oil exploration has been so pronounced that a lot of their environment has been damaged. A common case in question is that of Oginni. Thank you, the federal government is taking action to restore that land. However, there are others that really affects us. Mining is another issue. Recently, we've been having a lot of crisis in the mining communities, either in Zamfara or Osun State, wherein illegal miners come in and engage in indiscriminate and unsustainable mining. At the end of the day, pits are open, agricultural lands are damaged. All this affects the biodiversity because we are mining has taken place and a lot of the topsoil or useful part of the organisms have been exposed, habitats have been destroyed, a lot of animals and plants are removed for purpose of mining. This constitutes a very serious threat to biodiversity because, you know, animals need habitat for their survival and procreation. By the time you start mining indiscriminately and you don't give consideration to the organisms therein, the microbes, for example, they have their role to play. The producers and the consumers, they have an relationship whereby they have to be balanced. Once mining has taken place in an uncontrolled manner, as we have now all over the country, it poses a very big threat to biodiversity. Also, talking about the institutional angle, there is development. The country wants to develop, however, we need to manage our development with reality or in a sustainable way. For example, large expanses of land are open, either for industrial purposes, housing estates, roads, agriculture. All these have negative impact on biodiversity, especially when it is not done in a sustainable way. These are serious threats to biodiversity. That's why I said they are both institutional and individual. These are mainly the institutional areas. Development for industries. Industries will come up, open a large expanse of land, remove all the topsoil, no adequate soil management, waterways are blocked for purpose of creating new cities, as we have in the Lekki area. A lot of lands are being reclaimed for building. However, as this land are being reclaimed, organisms, fish, aquatic organisms that are in the natural habitats of that area are affected. So this causes a very major threat to biodiversity. Now, if you come to the individual level, at individual level, we have indiscriminate hunting. People hunt indiscriminately for animals. Even some that are endangered, they are killed in the process of getting money for individual use. And this is very serious because when you remove an animal, it takes some time, for especially indiscriminate, especially when you don't give respect to females or pregnant animals, or when you go fishing and you remove all the gravity fish from the water, or you fish excessively to the point at which you have reproduction of overfishing. This affects the environment and it's a very big threat to biodiversity because if you remove all the young ones, we have no rooms for the for future procreation. Also, when female animals are indiscriminately removed from the game, then you have a lot of problems coming up. So that's why we can say the threats to biodiversity is both institutional and individual. However, these threats, especially at individual level, could be controlled with good education, because education is a very major part in environment biodiversity problem. For example, an average man that has no means of livelihood goes into the game, remove any available animal. If you talk about biodiversity to such a person, he will ask you, he has no means of eating. So his survival to him comes before biodiversity. For this is a very major threat to biodiversity. Also, the population, uncontrolled population is a very big threat to biodiversity also, where people have more than enough children to cater for. They will not listen to biodiversity issues. They only want to satisfy their primary physiological issue before talking about biodiversity. this is also a very big challenge to biodiversity. Now, another major factor is the unnecessary craze for money. People will go into an area, though you want to exploit resources. How do you do it? Resources are supposed to be exploited in a way that coming generations, even present generation, will benefit, and those who are coming will benefit. For example, if you open a very large acreage of land for agriculture, and you don't put in sustainable measures that will help in managing the resources, including the microbiota and the macrobiota, you have problem in many because habitats are disturbed. Nursing grounds are also affected. This affects biodiversity and it constitutes a major threat to biodiversity. Another point we may want to look at is what effort is being put in to make sure that these threats are not really these resources are not overused. When you overuse resources, then you are removing things more than the rate of regeneration, and this also constitutes a nuisance and a threat to biodiversity. For example, in the mining industry, for example, in the extractive industry, where people go in and open a large expanse of land, create crevices, and in an attempt to bring out the ores, all this needs to be done in a way that the way you do one, you make sure you cover up and provide necessary reclamation purposes, either to remediation or other means of making sure that the land is not affected. Because basically the land, especially the soil, is the first part of contact of any biodiversity. Since organisms live on land, our first step is to make sure we get involved in soil conservation. So when you are practicing your agriculture or your mining activity, you do it in a way that soil is not negatively affected, and the soil could also be maximized to its carrying capacity. I think those are the major threats that we can talk of biodiversity, because that's just it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oginni. We must not forget that the world is currently witnessing a global pandemic, COVID-19. At this junction, we would like to invite from the British Council of Nigeria, Mr. Sean Melbourne, to say a few words on COVID-19, climate change, and the environment. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the invitation from the 11-11-12 Foundation to speak at this webinar on a super important topic. I just wanted to say that I think coronavirus has provided a stark reminder of what happens when humanity's relationship with nature breaks down. As we recover from COVID, I think we have an opportunity to protect and restore nature, reducing our exposure to deadly viruses and climate impacts in future. And as we recover from COVID, I think the decisions we make today will either lay the foundation for sound, sustainable and inclusive growth, or lock in polluting emissions for decades. And in doing so, we would make our society and the planet more vulnerable. So as presidency for COP26, the next big international climate conference, I want to say that the UK is committed to increasing climate ambition, that we will uphold the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because they are crucial frameworks for guiding the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. I think a science-led, clean and resilient recovery will also create employment in the industries of the future, while ensuring we address the linked challenges of public health, climate change, and biodiversity. Nature is in crisis. 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction. That's more than ever before in human history. Climate change is a major driver of biodiversity loss, and that in turn reduces our chances of solving the climate emergency. Ecosystems, however, can directly reduce carbon emissions, as some of your speakers have said, mitigating climate change by acting as natural carbon sinks. And healthy forests and wetlands are also essential for adaptation to climate change, because they can reduce the risks of flooding, which affects southern Nigeria in particular, of course, and increase water shortages, which affects the north. So that is why nature-based solutions will be a top priority for COP26. The scientists tell us that nature could potentially provide up to 1/3 of the cost-effective climate mitigation that's needed between now and 2030 to stabilize global warming below 2 degrees. It's absolutely critical that happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that response. Mr. Sean Melbourne from the British High Commission, talking COVID-19, climate, and the environment.
Chris Abans, in a way, want to know what the government of Nigeria is doing to sustain biodiversity following high gas flaring in the Niger Delta area. Dr. Onoja.
All right, thank you very much for government, but I will still talk about that question. The thing is, the Niger Delta flaring is a major problem. There's no doubt about that. And there has been laws and goalposts to end gas flaring. Started as far back as the 80s, but up to now we continue to shift it, and it's really a problem. And luckily, it's part of Nigeria's nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement, which has to be done if we want to make a headway, or if we want to walk the talk of fighting climate change in Nigeria. So I'm hoping that the government will be able this time around have the willpower to implement that. But that said, it is really sad the rate at which gas flaring is affecting our biodiversity, especially in that part of the country, and also in the country general and the world. If you look at it in the space that the world is a global village. So what the government is doing, I'm also hoping that the government is doing something. We've been advocating and pushing the government to ensure that they do the right thing, especially when it comes to implementing some of the protocols that have been agreed upon years back, and enforcing them, not just implementing them, but also enforcing them, so that it will go a long way to help biodiversity. Absolutely, gas flaring will definitely affect biodiversity. There's no doubt about that, and that is why we need to implement the protocol of ending gas flaring. Though we have the final deadline of 2030, but I wish that it comes sooner than later.
Thank you very much for that response, Dr. Onoja. We have another question here from our George in Edo. Through this question to Dr. Oginni, what are the effects of biodiversity and economic growth?
Thank you very much. Biodiversity has a profound effect on our economic performance. For example, like I said earlier on, if people decide to exploit the resources beyond their capacity, the resultant effect is that such resources will be diminished. Let's take an example. If you look at a plant, for example, if you keep harvesting that plant without planting another one for regeneration, a time will come that that plant will not be available. And that's why we have problem now in the lumbering industry. Lumbering has been an old-time vocation for some of our people. However, when they go into the bush to cut a tree, they don't make a provision. So, with time, those who are involved in that vocation will lose their job. Let's also look at the issue of harvesting natural resources. Fisheries, for example. If you keep going to the water and bringing out fish, time in, time out, without making provision for conservation, to create a period, either to set a limit to catch or a closed season during the breeding period of that fish, so that there will be regeneration. A time will come that there will be no fish enough, that inputs will far outweigh the output from that very water body. And at that point, a lot of people will lose their job. And this is a very serious effect. In fact, in the fishing industry, this has been the major effect of fishery collapse the world over, wherein people go into the sea to harvest, because everybody believes that the sea is a gift of nature, and no man has control. And everybody wants to maximize whatever he or she can get from the activity. Rent is more important to people than preserving for future and for those who are coming after them. So if people keep on exploiting resources in this way, a time will come that there will be nothing for anybody to exploit, and then those who are in that profession will have no job, they will have no income, and there will be unemployment within that sector, and it will spill over to the general environment. Because if people are unemployed in an area where they are specialized, they look for other means, and they go and encroach other means, and when they exploit other, and it becomes a chain. And when that chain gets to a point, there will be nothing for anybody to take again. Then, most of the time, we have issue of crisis coming in. The first step is we have people crying of unemployment. The next step, we have crime rate increasing. So, biodiversity itself has to do with security. Because if it up to a point that you cannot get anything from it again, and you have no means of livelihood, the chances are for some of them who are of low value to go into crime. And that's why when you control biodiversity, you are indirectly securing the nation and enhancing peace. Thank you very much.
Ariam, did you notice something from his speech that biodiversity is very important for economic growth and also the environment? We're not only damaging the environment, but we're damaging our potential to benefit from the environment. So we need to do something about biodiversity. Now, moving on, I would like to direct this question to Mrs. Kafilat Adedeji. Looking at the threats highlighted to biodiversity in Nigeria, can we say species are disappearing at an alarming rate? Are plant species and animal species disappearing at an alarming rate in the country and even in Africa at large?
So I would agree that looking at our actions over time, we've really endangered so many species. So many species are even going into extinction in the wild, except we start. So I agree totally. I say a yes to that question. So except we start thinking, rethinking our business models and our individual activities back to retracing our steps and looking at how we can preserve the ones that are still present and how we can mimic nature to start implementing in our agricultural processes especially, and so that we can limit as much as possible the effect of deforestation. And another way I think we can also combat this challenge, this threat against species that are really being endangered because of our activities. So we rethink our processes, we start looking at holistic approaches, we start looking at environmental sustainable approaches, especially, I'm saying especially in the agricultural sectors and individual activities, because that is the bulk of where we have the result of our endangering species or extincting species in the wild. And also again, the companies, manufacturing companies, because of the fume exhaust. So we have to start rethinking the process where we cite new manufacturing companies. And the existing manufacturing countries, because it's going to take a while for them to convert to the natural system, they start looking at ways by which they can contain their exhaust fumes from their industrial action and limit it as much as possible to being released to the environment or to the forest, so to say. And in our agricultural activities, like I mentioned, because that's my own expertise, we'll start looking at organic approach, which is the most holistic approach to cultivating crops. We start involving every part of the ecosystem, including the plants, including the animals, including the microorganisms as well. For instance, when we started out our own company for organic production, we just don't look at organic because organic is healthy. We look at the holistic approach. What will make our organic process sustainable? So we had to involve all the processes, plants, animal, and the microorganisms. We are dealing in mushroom. So mushrooms is making the whole other system sustainable, because we want to mimic the exact system we see in the wild, whereby we have diverse organisms, the fungi, the bacteria, the plants, and every one of them coexist together without one affecting the other. So we are trying to mimic the same system naturally into our practice. And though it's going to take a long period for the existing companies that have been practicing conventional approach, but for the new upcoming companies or the upcoming businesses or even individuals, it's high time we started thinking whatever business model we want to create, whatever things we want to do, we should start thinking sustainability. We should start thinking, how are we not going to add up to endangering the species in the wild? How do we want to resuscitate the whole process and make our activities also friendly with the environment and the inhabitants of the environment? So I agree, I say yes, and I also give us measures that we can use to combat these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Adedeji. So far, we've discussed the hindrances to biodiversity, we've discussed the challenges, we've even discussed the threats. My next question is one of great importance. How do we protect biodiversity, especially in Nigeria? And I'm going to direct that question at Dr. Oginni. All right, I redirect that question to Dr. Onoja.
All right, thank you very much. You see, the thing about the biodiversity that we have and how we can protect it, sometimes we're trying to push the responsibility to the government. We all have a part to play. The little ways that we can do, we all have a part to play. Let me give you an instance. When you see a lizard around you, when you see a snake around you, let me put it that way, a snake even, some people tend to kill them. Let me shock you. If you don't have rats running around your house, that means you have snakes around you, helping you to check the rats. If you don't have rats around you, that means you have snakes helping you to check those rats, the rat population. So in our little way, we can play our part to ensure that we ensure that we play our part to protect biodiversity. So that's the little way I want us to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, sir. Brief and straight to the point. Our next question is for Mr. Obiajulu. From a business perspective, how can we benefit more from biodiversity without exploiting it?
Okay, I think how can we partake from the benefit that comes with biodiversity without exploiting it? So I might not be able to speak to the very, this would not be my real core competence, speaking to what biodiversity is, but what I can do, what I can speak about is how can we work in a sustainable manner in which every single component of the environment is safe, right? How can we try as much as possible to ensure that whatever we're doing, the consequences across all the stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean farmers, I mean the environment, I mean land conservation, water conservation. How do we ensure that all the stakeholders in the entire system have a positive benefit. So in agriculture, it's pretty simple. Like Mrs. Adedeji talked about, how can we ensure that principles like organic production, play a very crucial role in these activities? How can we reduce the amount? I mean, I've been answering a couple of questions on the platform, talking about what are the alternatives to pesticides and insecticides application. We have chemical ways to go about pest control. We also have natural ways to go about pest control, where you have certain animals, like Dr. Onoja talked about. There are certain animals that can help in the prevention of certain types of pests, even in farm, right? But there are also organic certified products that do not have that harmful effect that the conventional chemical applications would have on. We've also seen, even in other parts of the world, the levels of reject of agricultural produce coming from this side of the world, that's Africa and Nigeria, because of the excessive use of chemical components that have been prohibited in other parts of the world. And our farmers are beginning to look at what are the impacts of these these sanctions or these limitations to exporting commodities out there. So basically, it comes back to how can we ensure that all the stakeholders in the system, land, water, what have you, play a crucial role. How can we conserve the use of water? We might be blessed with water in Nigeria, but there are other parts of the world that would scramble for water. How do we ensure that the optimal use and application of water is done in such a way that it doesn't result to waste, right? And I think that would be one of the best approaches of ensuring that every single component plays a crucial role without exploiting the benefits that they have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Now, our next question is directed at Mr. Sean Melbourne from the British High Commission. Sir, what are the plans the UK government has in place to ensure that COP26 is not only successful, but that everything agreed upon would also be achieved?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's got to be achieved. The climate crisis is, some people used to think it was in the distant future, but it's not. It's here and now. Even if you look in Nigeria, for example, and the heavy flooding in the south of the country and increasing desertification in the north, you look at sea level rises, you look at the melting of polar ice caps. It's here and now, and we need to work here and now to have a cleaner and resilient economy, and I think we all need to play our part. So that is why the UK is convening not only government representatives at COP26 in Glasgow next year, but representatives from business, civil society organisations, academics, and the youth. Everybody, and I really do mean everybody, has a role to play in addressing the climate emergency. So we want to see an energy transformation. We want to see greater use of renewables, less use of fossil fuels, in particular coal, which is particularly damaging to the climate. We want to see a greater role, as I said before, for nature-based solutions, because the forests and the wetlands do soak up a lot of the carbon from the atmosphere, so they need to be protected. It's important, and in Nigeria, the mangroves are so important, and I've had a discussion with the Minister of State for the Environment here in Nigeria about that, and she too is a great advocate for protecting and ideally replenishing the mangroves, because they play such a important role in protecting coastlines from flooding and the communities that rely on fisheries, for example. So I think there's a huge amount of work to do. We're working in multiple areas. The UK and Nigeria cannot do it alone. But I think, with one or two exceptions, there's huge global goodwill to build back better from COVID-19 and have a cleaner, more resilient, greener recovery. And of course, it's got to be inclusive as well. It's got to reduce poverty. It's got to create jobs. In Nigeria, we'll be looking to invest in sustainable climate-smart agriculture, which employs, of course, so many people in Nigeria. But we will also be looking at sustainable cities and working in partnership with Nigeria on that issue as well. And a speaker of yours mentioned the important role that finance can play in accelerating, for example, the deployment of solar technologies. So we will embed an advisor, a climate finance advisor, in the Ministry of Finance, who will work closely with the Ministry of the Environment to help Nigeria tap into the green finance, the international climate finance that is out there, but it needs to be tapped, and some of the processes can be quite complex. So we hope this small contribution will help Nigeria, which is a big and important country at the heart of Africa, to get more finance. Thank you.
Dr. Oginni, how can protecting biodiversity help mitigate climate change?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Now, you see, protecting the biodiversity has a very a good impact in mitigating against climate change. Protecting the biodiversity can be viewed from two angles. One is that of conservation. The other one is the mitigation aspect. For conservation, when you make use of biodiversity in a sustainable way, the environment will be protected. For example, now, if you don't allow excess deforestation, if timber or forest products are used wisely, you have a local climate being created, because the trees act in a way to protect the soil from the direct impact of the sun. When this happens, it reduces rate of evaporation. And when rate of evaporation is reduced, then the amount of heat being emitted into the atmosphere will be reduced. And consequently, this will also have effect on the clouding and seeding effect of rain. For example, if you expose too much land to evaporation, within a short time, you have a lot of condensation and everything taking place. Now, if this occurs, remember, the soil is already exposed. At the slightest rain, there will be flooding. So if you protect the environment by allowing afforestation and conserving green areas, then the effect of rain on the soil will be reduced. When there is rain, there will be vegetation to mitigate against the sheet erosion that may likely occur due to movement of the water on the soil surface. So indirectly, when you protect the biodiversity there, that is the crops, the plants, the animals, you are indirectly reducing the effect of climate change on that particular environment. For example, now, and if you talk about mitigation, if you open an area and you plant trees, the more trees you plant and cover crops, you are protecting first, the rate of evaporation, and when you do that, the rate at which when rain falls, the erosion will occur will be reduced. So gully erosions and other things will be removed. Now, because you have tried to do that, there is what we call the lowering effect on the environment itself. The temperature will not rise beyond the normal carrying capacity. The ozone layer will also be protected. When you reduce the rate of carbon dioxide emission in a particular area, for example, now, if you have a green area, most of the carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the plants and they will release oxygen. When this carbon dioxide are absorbed, they tend to reduce the normal global temperature. But through first the local climate zone that you have created, which has reduced the rate of carbon dioxide escape, which also reduce the rate of warming up, which also we have effect on the rate of rainfall and the consequent flooding. Also, that if you want to go in along with mitigation, you can, if you create reservoirs, for example, if you create flood water catchment points, when these flood water catchment points are created, within and around them, that tends to develop a local vegetation that also prevents the effect of the sun coming directly in contact with the soil. When you have this, there is a cooling effect of this reservoir or water body in the environment. In this, it does reducing the rate at which global warming takes place. Because one thing we should realize is that one major factor of climate change is the issue of global warming. When you have global warming and the temperature rises beyond what is beyond the threshold, then you have other things coming up. There will be change in vegetation, desertification will come in, and all the like. So as to protect the biodiversity, you are indirectly controlling the climate change. You are minimizing the rate of climate change, especially the one that are anthropogenic nature. Now, if you have an environment where you have a lot of vegetation, afforestation taking place, and other things, reservoirs constructed around to prevent escape of water, on the long run, this reservoirs and afforestation program will create at initial stage a local climate. As the effect spreads, it goes into the global energy cycle, thereby reducing the rate at which the carbon dioxide is released and warming up of the atmosphere. By doing this, you are not only conserving biodiversity, you are also minimizing against the effect of climate change. This is a very one way of controlling climate change through biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next question is for Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu. Many young people out there are looking at investing in the green sector in agriculture, and they're considering ways to do it in a sustainable fashion. Our question, Mr. Kenneth, what advice, what policies, what tools, what roadmap can you lay out for young entrepreneurs in the green sector? Dr. Onoja, while we wait for Kenneth to respond to that question. A lot of people right now are talking about green recovery after COVID-19. What would be your response to green recovery? Can you talk about it? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having. Even as an organization, we have what we christen as Green Recovery Nigeria, because we have noticed that over time our forest cover which was 40% at independence, has been depleted to less than 7% or 4%, depending on what literature you consult. And that has given us of forest exploitation, but we didn't learn the art of forest without replenishing it, and that's where we find out we have two evils that is simply we have all we need to do. We have everybody has a responsibility to plant trees to make sure that everywhere is green, because and that is why probably everybody is calling we are going back to basics, because the solution lies in nature. Whatever problem we are going to, the solution lies in nature, and that is why this is rightly themed time for nature, time for us to consider.
Hello. All right, we seem to. Dr. Onoja, do we have you there? All right, that will cut off briefly. At this juncture, we're going to take a brief break for a cup of coffee or water. Let everyone catch their breath. And we're going to have a video on biodiversity, which will be coming up. So we implore everyone, while we're on the brief break, 1 minute break, we will implore everyone to take a look at this video. When we return, we'll wrap up the segment. Yes.
Biodiversity is the web of life. Biodiversity is the full variety of all the species that you see in the natural environment around you.
Biodiversity is all about the variety of life.
Biodiversity is a term that represents the total variety of all life on Earth.
Biodiversity is life. It heals us, as more than 70,000 plant and tree species on Earth are used in medicine. It gives us shelter. Without wood, we couldn't build houses, furniture, or tools. Biodiversity feeds us and clothes us. The consumption patterns of people in rich countries are the principal cause of biodiversity loss. The rapid loss of the Earth's species is estimated to be between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than the natural extinction rate. Today, our planet hosts 7 billion people. We need to preserve biodiversity so that it can meet the needs of 9 billion of us in 2050.
In the last 50 years, our activities have dramatically reduced biodiversity across the globe. We've snuffed out habitats, reduced populations of wild animals by 60%, and even driven whole species extinct. The number of lions in Africa has dropped by 65%. The number of individual flying insects in Europe has dropped by 75%. The number of bluefin tuna in the Pacific has dropped by 95%. Biodiversity is dropping everywhere and fast. This is catastrophic for nature and therefore ourselves. We talk about climate change a lot, but biodiversity loss is as important an issue. How do we stop this loss of life? How do we ensure that biodiversity, our planet's vital statistic, begins to increase again? In fact, we already know exactly what to do. Reduce our impact by making sure that everything we do, we can do forever. For the biggest gains, we could concentrate our efforts on 4 goals. Phasing out fossil fuels and replacing them with renewables. This will not only slow the warming of the planet and the acidification of the ocean, but it will lead to clean air for all of us. Upgrading to efficient food production and reducing our consumption of meat. We'll require far less space to provide for ourselves, leaving more for grasslands, reducing deforestation and our demand for fresh water, and feeding more people with healthier, more affordable food. Working together to properly manage our ocean. A global network of no-fish zones and a treaty on the use of international waters would restore the health of the ocean so it actually produces more fish for us all to eat. Working hard to keep hold of the wild populations we still have, encouraging nature wherever we can. In the ocean, on land we no longer need, and even in our cities. If we make these changes, we'll be a long way to becoming a species in balance with nature once again. We will have taken a remarkable journey, from 1 million people struggling to survive, to several billion living long, healthy lives on a stable planet, able to provide for all our needs. Only at that point will the Anthropocene, the age of humans, be truly underway. At that point, we'll be proud to call it our planet. How do we create a future in which both people and nature can thrive? We open our eyes to this moment in history. Think on a planetary scale. Embrace the challenge we face. And do something we humans are very good at. Change the world.
Welcome back. This is the 2020 World Environmental Symposium. I beg your pardon. Thank you so much for going on that brief. We hope you enjoyed that video. To wrap up this segment, we have questions for each of our panelists. One question for each of our panelists, and of course we're going to kick off a question for Dr. Onoja.
Okay, Dr. Onoja, this is from Darasimi Oshun from Praise Foundation Model School. He wants you to talk on biodiversity, the role of biodiversity in the control of erosion in the southeast. Dr. Onoja?
All right, we move on to our next question. I will come back to Dr. Onoja to respond to that question. Let's move all the way to India. This question. We move all the way to India now. This question is for Mrs. Adedeji. Salesh Mahapatra from India says, why doesn't third world countries give priority to save biodiversity within countries by the UN. I believe what he's trying to say is, why doesn't third world countries give priority to biodiversity policies prevailing within countries within the UN?
Basically, the reason why I think priority is not given, that it seems like priority is not given, is the level of ignorance in our climb. I think basically it's just number one, ignorance. The level of ignorance is high. Number two is the fact that the survivor is the key thing that is mostly what are the majority of the population of the third world countries are giving priority. Many people are still struggling to survive, so to say. So and everybody, another key thing that I also think is the reason why this is so is because of the fact that there are no policies implemented. There are policies put in place, so to say, but they are not being implemented. Like the environment is just too complex for monitoring these policies to save biodiversity, and so people are not compliant. One, because most people are not even aware of the policies, ignorance, going back to my first thing. Secondly, because majority is really struggling to survive. The poverty level is very, very high. So I would say that's basically, from my own understanding of that question, I think that's basically a cause.
Oginni, can you please give us examples of some effective policies for SDG 15 that you know that are implemented across the globe? Effective policies. Dr. Oginni? We've had a lot of talk about policies, effective policies. We would like to know what policies exist currently in Nigeria and what policies exist across the globe.
Oh, okay. Let me talk about the ones that we can easily relate with. And the one I like most is the Endangered Species Act. That's a policy instrument with which we can use to help biodiversity, because a lot of our species are endangered. The ones that are very much concerned to us are endangered, and they are being traded upon. So one of the global instruments that is used to fight that, to check that, is the Endangered Species Act, which is in response to the CITES Act, which is on the CBD. I know it's something that we need to look at and really try to see what we can do to ensure that we implement it. It's not just having it, but also to implement it. Usually the enforcement is the issue here. So that's one of the policies that I see that is very important for us to be able to put in place. Other policy frameworks and for other policy statements have not really, there are lots of them, but that's the one I want to really emphasize on, and that's the one, for me personally, that goes a long way. There are other policy documents like the NBSAPs that Nigeria has, which is being reviewed at the moment. It's something also that needs to be implemented. At the moment, as an organization, what we're trying to do is to look at some environmental laws and policies and see which ones are still fit for purpose, which ones are at cross purpose, and which ones are outdated, so that by the time we review them, we'll be able to present a comprehensive list of those that should be outlawed, those that should be reviewed and updated so that to meet current and temporary challenges in conservation sphere, and those that should be empowered and have biting ability, because it's not just to have those laws, but the ability also for them to bite, that is by enforcement agencies.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for that response. Thank you so much, sir, for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Oginni. Dr. Oginni, we would like for you to comment on government policies right now and individual attitudes. Can you tell us a bit about government policies and individual attitudes of the people to ensure effective sustainability of our biodiversity? Right here.
Thank you very much. Please can you...
Dr. Oginni?
Please can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud. Can I take the question?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please repeat the question. Repeat the question, please. Repeat the question, please. Hello, please come again for the question. Hello? Hello? Could you please come again?
Please, can you comment on government policy?
Hello, please come again for the question.
Effective sustainability of our biodiversity.
Yes,
can you comment on that?
I can't hear you clearly, please, for the early part of the question.
Dr. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Please comment on government policies here in Nigeria and individual attitudes, the attitudes of the people, the importance of individual attitudes towards effective sustainability of our biodiversity here in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Yeah, from the government angle, I can say a lot has been done, quite a lot. For example, the government has put in place a lot of machinery to curtail the adverse or threats to biodiversity. Notable among this is the enactment of the conservation laws in Nigeria and putting in place conservation institutions in the country. Earlier on, you know, because of the climate change, we've been having a problem with desertification. And the government is really approaching this in a very good way. All over the areas prone to desertification, a lot of afforestation program is being carried out by the government to ensure that our biodiversity is sustained and improved on. For example, we have programs of 4 million trees in Katsina, the Chad Basin area, where trees have been planted and people are being employed to maintain the trees so as to create a green belt within that zone. There is also the stove, the distribution of kerosene stove, enhanced kerosene stove to women in the rural areas, especially in the areas prone to desertification. These are part of government policies to ensure that we maintain our biodiversity. And if you come into the extractive industry area, there has been a lot of laws against gas flaring, and against oil pollution. Oil companies now than before are being sanctioned heavily for any infringements that may lead to oil spill and other things that may affect the environment, especially in the Niger Delta area. A case in point, which is very commendable, is the reclamation of the Oginni, the land, from the adverse effect of oil spill. We have all this. Coming down was the Endangered Species Act, then the prohibition of trading in some wild animals and their parts. For example, in Nigeria, it is illegal for you to trade on elephant tusk and crocodile skin, and some of the animals that are already endangered. You cannot trade in them. These are policies being put in place by the government, and control of poaching in the games and forest reserve all over the country. There's effective policing of the games reserve and the forest reserve to prevent poaching. In the aquatic area, there's the Fishing Law Act and the Sea Law of the Sea Decree, Act, beg your pardon, Law of the Sea Act, which prohibits obnoxious fishing and use of obnoxious gears in our water bodies. All these are geared towards conserving our biodiversity. Also, there's the establishment of an EIA, which is Environmental Impact Assessment, in which if you want to establish any big project, you must carry out an environmental impact study of that environment to do the assessment of the effects of that project on that area, and if there will be, what are the mitigation things in place. For example, now it is now common knowledge that anytime the federal government wants to, or any of our government wants to establish any big project, they do the EIA, bring out the report, and allow for public input to make sure that that project will not have undesirable effects on the environment. So that all these are geared towards sustaining the biodiversity of our environment. There is also the Grazing Act. The Grazing Act is in fact a very timely act, because now because the effects of the climate change, wherein the northern part of the country is now being encroached through desertification. There has now been laws providing for sustainable grazing, whereby grazer nomads are allowed to graze in areas where they know there will be no adverse effect on the natural vegetation and other activities there. All these are geared towards sustaining our biodiversity. At the individual level, more people are now being enlightened. Unlike before, people are now being enlightened that anything they do against the environment will very, very affect them also. Now, when people want to now try to as good as the educator. I want to explain a point where all over you're encouraging flood. People now need to be sensitized that they should, as much as possible, have concrete only in the walkway and areas where they normally have to step around, and leave some area for water to percolate so that there will be no flooding. Also, people are now being sensitized. There is need for people to change their diet. That's the truth. People tend to favor eating a particular type of food. Some of this food people choose have adverse effect on the environment because of the nature of their production. For example, let's look at the aquaculture. A lot of people focus on taking catfish instead of taking other species like the tilapia, the carp, and the like, the authorities, which are really sustainable, because catfish depends on high protein food, and since they cannot get this high protein food enough in the wild, it has to depend heavily on fish meal production. Leads to overexploitation of the aquatic environment deployed into the water to catch trash fish for fish meal production. All this we need to change. We need to change our diet. That's individual approach. We change our diet so that we take more of vegetarian food than the consuming animal food stuff. So this from individual point. Then there is also the need for us to control the family and practice better cooking habits. When people cook, there's a culture in Nigeria. People cook that in case you have visitor. However, when this visitor does not come, this food are poured away, and when they are poured away, they decay. As they decay, they release obnoxious gases that are not environmentally friendly, which invariably, by the time you add several acids together, pouring away food, decaying, releasing methane into the atmosphere, depleting the ozone layer, then we are now making sure that we have adverse climate effects, which also in turn affect the biodiversity. So on the individual aspect, we still need more to do to educate people on why the environment the biodiversity is very important to him, and why he should keep the environment in a sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very, very well put, and one that we all need to take into consideration. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you, to appreciate all our panelists who have been responding to questions and answers within the question and answer segment of this webinar. Each and every one of our panelists, we take this opportunity to thank you. My final question for Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu. A lot of young people out there are trying to go into business in the green sector. We have a lot of young entrepreneurs who are considering business, new business, starting up business, and sustainable business. What advice, what roadmap can you give young entrepreneurs in Nigeria today who are just venturing into the green sector, business-wise, to achieve effective and sustainable business? Kenneth we apologize, we sincerely apologize. It seems Mr. Kenneth is having issues with the network. Like we said, we just want to wrap up at this point and individually appreciate each and every one of our panelists in this second segment. It has been absolutely insightful and interesting. We want to appreciate Dr. Olatunde Oginni, an associate professor and head of department of fisheries at the Adekunle Ajasi University.
Director of Technical Programs at the Nigerian Conservation Foundation.
We want to say thank you to Mr. Kenneth Obiajulu, the managing director at Farm Crowdy.
Lastly, we'd like to thank Kafilat Adedeji, founder of Prudent Agro-Industry, and also a PhD student at the University of Ibadan.
Thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you to our audience. We would now like to welcome the Group Managing Director, the General Group Manager, Barrister Adana Kalejaye, to give us the closing remark.
We are reminded of our secular action and definitely know that climate action and biodiversity will need to talk policies and take action. I know because we had a very informative session. On behalf of 11-11-12 Foundation, we say thank you to everyone for joining us for the 2020 World Environment Day Symposium. I would like to announce the winner of the competition that was announced earlier on, in the person of Abdulaziz Ogunji. We celebrate you and we encourage every young person to continue to engage in activities that promote the environment and conserve biodiversity. Thank you once again for joining us. We do hope to have a wonderful celebration celebrating the world and the Earth Day. See you next year. Bye-bye.